all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling, saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of the sons said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided the property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating. No one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.'" So he set off and went to his father, filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his slaves, "Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got his son back safe and sound." Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered him, "Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him." Then the father said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found." The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Going around welcoming and even eating with sinners. That is the criticism leveled at Jesus at the beginning. It's the Pharisees and scribes who bring this up when they notice that Jesus is getting really popular with a certain crowd, tax collectors and sinners. Pharisees and scribes were religious experts. They often show up in the Gospels wringing their hands about dietary laws, Sabbath observance, and ritual purity. We shouldn't hold that against them, though. They were respected teachers and scholars responsible for interpreting the scriptures and guiding people in the ways of right behavior. But this guy, Jesus, seems to be undermining that effort. He is spending time with unrepentant sinners. He's even sitting down to share meals with them, meals that are not likely to be following dietary requirements, worry the Pharisees. Is Jesus condoning these sinners' poor behavior? Shouldn't he demand that they clean up their act? This isn't the first time that the Pharisees and scribes have brought this up. Earlier in Luke, Jesus chose a tax collector to be one of his disciples, one of his closest inner circle of associates. Tax collectors with Rome and for their tendencies towards dishonesty and exploitation. That's the kind of person that Jesus picked to be one of his disciples? Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? The shocked religious authorities asked Jesus when he chose that tax collector, to which Jesus answered, "Those who are well have no need of a doctor, but those who are sick. I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners to repentance." Well, this time, in the story that we just heard, when the Pharisees and scribes grumble that Jesus is too lenient on sinners, Jesus tells a story with which many of us are familiar. This story is often called the prodigal son. It's easy at first glance to figure out which son is the prodigal, the wasteful, reckless, spendthrift son. The one who is so eager to spend his inheritance that he asks for it early, leaves the family estate with barely a goodbye, and doesn't come home again until he has frittered away all the wealth he did not earn to begin with. Perhaps he wouldn't have come home at all, except that he falls on hard times. He's far from home, far from familial or community support when a famine hits. He's out of money, struggling to find work, and unable to afford food. Then he realizes that the solution to his problem is to go back home. His father was generous enough, too generous perhaps, to give him his inheritance early. Maybe he can rely on that generosity again. The son actually prepares a speech that sounds like it might even be genuine, about how he realizes he has screwed up and wasted his family's resources. "Just let me be like one of your hired hands," he plans to tell his father. But when he gets home, he doesn't even get to that part of the speech before his father rushes to shower him with that lavish generosity that the son was hoping for. Clothes, jewels, gifts, and an extravagant feast. We never know if the son has truly repented, truly changed his wasteful ways. The father doesn't wait to find out. The prodigal is not treated like a hired hand after all, but rather like the beloved son his father has always seen him as. "We have to celebrate," declares the father, "because this son of mine was lost and has been found." Is that true? Has the father found his lost son? Have I just recounted to you that parable that Jesus told, or is part of the story missing? The thing about Jesus' parables is that they always contain a surprise, an unexpected twist that leaves the listener wondering. Well, as soon as the jukebox starts up at that party for the recently returned son, as soon as the disco ball starts to spin, as soon as the bartender pours that first drink, the other shoe drops. This father has two sons. He's not at the party. He isn't hugging his returned brother. He's out in the fields working, which the story implies he has been doing ever since the younger son walked out years earlier. Not only is the older son working instead of hitting the dance floor, he doesn't even seem to know that this party is happening. He has to ask one of the household servants, "What is going on?" "Don't you know?" the servant tells him, "Your father has got his son back." Oh no. This is the moment of the parable that hits you right in the solar plexus. The father got one of his sons back, but he has two sons. Well, the father realizes his mistake and comes out from the party to plead with the elder son. Perhaps he just now realizes that there is more than one way to lose a son. All he can do is listen as the older brother cries painfully, "For all these years I have obeyed you and worked for you, and you have never thrown a party for me. But when this son of yours comes back, you kill the fatted calf for him." That's what he says, this son of yours. He can't even bring himself to say the word brother. The elder son's speech to his father carries an unspoken question. Had this father forgotten that the elder son, too, is a son of his? Well, no. The father has not forgotten. The very first word he says in response is child. My child, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But your brother, he says, your brother has come home and been found. So we celebrate. What part of that do you think the older son will accept? The prodigal is not only a son, but also a brother. Will the elder reconcile with him? And the prodigal is not the only son. The elder is also a son. Will he reconcile with his father? Will the celebration over the lost being found be complete? Will both sons allow themselves to be found? Will the family be whole again? Jesus leaves the end of the story open for us to wonder about. There is no easy resolution, no simple interpretation. There is only an invitation to wonder where we find ourselves in this story. Well, what do you suppose that the Pharisees and scribes heard in this parable? It's hard to imagine that it put to rest their concerns about Jesus' reckless association with unrepentant sinners. In this story, the father celebrated the return of the younger son without ever even knowing if he had learned any prudence. Perhaps Jesus was teaching the Pharisees to welcome everyone, regardless of their behavior, just as Jesus did. Maybe he was reminding them yet again that his ministry was for the sick, not for the well, for the lost. Pharisees walked away from this parable thinking about how the father thought he was welcoming the right one, but he actually missed a lost one who also needed welcoming and celebration. The one who was lost was right under the father's nose the whole time. How easy it is to lose those whom we take for granted. Perhaps Jesus was teaching the Pharisees to reconsider their own definitions of who is lost and who is in need of welcome. Or perhaps those Pharisees walked away wondering about whether their resentment against Jesus would destroy them, like the elder brother's resentment destroyed his family. Even though that older brother was just as beloved, just as welcome, it was his own anger that prevented him from coming into the family celebration. Were the Pharisees actually missing the party because of their judgment of Jesus? Were they preventing themselves from coming to the feast of God's mercy? Of course, the enduring power of this parable is that those questions aren't only for the Pharisees, are they? They are also for us. What gift of love are we squandering? What lost ones are we forgetting about? What reconciliation and healing might be possible in our relationships? No matter where we find ourselves in the story, it ends the same way it ended for the two lost sons and their father, the same way it ended for the Pharisees and scribes. It ends with an invitation to celebration. Whatever their mysteries, Jesus' teachings always remind us that God's table is bigger than our limitations, that at God's feast, all are welcome and all can be fed, and that God's abundance and mercy are always overflowing beyond our wildest expectations. And Jesus' proclamation is not only through his words, through his sermons and stories, but also through his actions. Remember where this all started. This fellow Jesus welcomes sinners and eats with them. Well, isn't that good news for lost sinners like us? Thanks be to God. Amen.